delighted to host the Float guys, to offer the benefit of our Zoom room tonight, and I'm looking forward to the community call. So yeah, welcome everyone, and yeah, Paul and John, take it away.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate the introduction. Yeah, and once again, welcome everyone. It's lovely to have such an active community at such an early stage of a project, particularly in the Telegram, in the Discord, and joining us here for this community call. So thank you so much. But and also once again, if there are any questions, please pop them in the chat, or raise, some may say, your proverbial hand, and we'll try and get to you as soon as possible. As you may know already, I'm John, and also joined here with Paul, and we're from the Abbey Road Hackers. We're an anonymous team of researchers, but really we're banded together by two core beliefs, which is the project should come first. We're not concerned about the personalities involved. And stablecoins do need a bit of a refresh, to put it quite bluntly. And I mean, the reality is currently crypto is presented in dollars. And why is this? You know, it is stable. Yes, okay. We have a concept of the purchasing power of a dollar, what sort of goods and services I'd be able to buy, whether it's a hamburger or a dollar pizza. Unfortunately,
John's brilliant eating habits there.
Yeah, I'll get onto that a bit more later. But you know, unfortunately, the original cryptocurrencies, one of the first few that have gained massive market prominence, mainly Ethereum, Bitcoin, they don't share this property because of their relative volatility. And the volatility is obviously too hard for some to handle, hence the creation of stablecoins. At the same time, these assets are often used as stores of value rather than true currencies. If dollars were just a functional hangover from traditional finance, then that would be one thing. The reality is, though, is that, you know, as you may see, we're in a very strong expansionary monetary environment, and the purchasing power is being eroded. If you're a stablecoin pegged to the dollar, your purchasing power is being eroded. It is what it is, unfortunately. And here at Float, what we want to do is really create the decentralized money system of the future. At the heart of the protocol is Float Token. It is really and truly designed to be the first crypto-native internet currency, fully satisfying all three major properties of money: a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. Unlike most other stablecoins, while Float is designed to be stable and have significantly lower volatility than most cryptocurrencies, it's not here to hold its price to a dollar value or be pegged per se. Instead, like most fiat currencies we use day to day, it's designed to float and change value over time. Now, Float is stabilized through frequent auctions to expand or contract the supply. It's also partly supported by a basket of cryptocurrencies that are used as part of this auction process. Float is also supported by second token banks, where the distribution of which is actually well underway, with 10 days left of phase one of the bank distribution, and phase two happening very soon, but we'll get on to more of that later. Bank serves three purposes. That is, first, to take profit created in times of excess demand for Float. Second, to support the price of Float from time to time. And third, really most importantly, is to govern the Float protocol, which is why we took this approach of having such a fair and democratic launch, with an initial bank issuance that is designed to achieve a wide distribution across different crypto communities, different DeFi communities, and incentivize ownership by owners who are really and truly active participants in other decentralized protocols. So that's really it as an introduction to the overall system. And yeah, so over to you, Paul, or if there are any questions, please let us know, pop them in the chat, raise your hand.
We know how difficult Zoom calls can be with this kind of stuff, but yeah, we really want to make this as sort of dynamic as we can, but understand, like, as this kind of things happen, this is it's obviously not the ideal scenario for there to be in person. But in case there aren't any questions, I'm going to start with giving a bit of overview of what the latest updates are, what we've latest been doing, and then that's kind of the sort of start will go on. And then if you have any questions as we go, then we'll sort of jump in and answer those. So obviously you'll all be aware of the sort of big forum we've done, which has just come out. We now hit 574 users for that, which is nice, and lots of discussion. And we'll come a little bit later onto the sort of phase 2 plans and what we're going to do about that. We've had a load of great suggestions of different tokens, which is really useful. And like, we obviously missed some which we weren't thinking of at the beginning. And also some other sort of different techniques we can do to do phase 2. Our holders have spiked up again.
Esa Talita, Josefina.
Josefina. Or not.
Básicamente sí, pero vamos a borrar ahora.
But yeah, so in general, the holders have spiked up. We've got 764 of the holders themselves, plus over 1,000 staked. We've got some comparison style blogs in the wins. So we've got some like ones related to RAI, we've got some ones related to other sort of big protocols there. And we're going to sort of drop those when there's a slow news day or something else. Yeah, as has just been said, like it's been a global experience. That was something which we had quite a lot of fun out. Ringo being able to speak many different languages was a complete shock to me, but that was fun. And yeah, so in terms of other updates, we've got the interactive white paper, which is still ongoing. It's sort of basically there. I'm just sort of fiddling with the models and making the visualizations a little bit prettier, which is, you know, it's going to be as long as a piece of string is. So eventually I'm going to have to cut myself off and just go like, no, we need to release it and let them see. And the smart contract stuff is going really well. The sort of big interesting changes we've made is we've now got like an open start. So what this means is anyone can decide to start an auction at any time, which creates a really interesting dynamic of allowing people to just hop in and go like, oh, there's an arbitrage opportunity here. Let's launch an auction and see what we can do with it. So that's going to be an interesting concept we didn't go into detail with in the docs. And more than that, we've kind of gone through the baskets and the oracles. So we're using, because of that new sort of drop-in design, we have to sort of do a more interesting take on oracles, which have a sort of granularity of the length of time of an auction, which is currently like 150 blocks and stuff like that. And the UI UX stuff is proceeding apace. We've got it with the designer, and we've got this sort of UX sketched out. And they did the wonderful design which you've all seen on the staking website. So we're very confident that we'll get another great move there. So that's kind of the rough updates of things going on. Oh, there we go. Joseph's given us a question. The multi-sig being handled is, yeah, so it's a two-step process. So it's both a multi-sig and a time lock. The multi-sig is a Gnosis multi-sig, which has the 4 of us on it, which obviously, you know, is not trustworthy enough. So we've also got the 2-day time lock on that. And that is through all privilege positions. So not only is it the minting, it's also for things like if we decide to pause, or if you want to upgrade the contracts or things like that. Yeah, it is 3 out of 4. Just in case one of us, you know, gets hit by a bus tomorrow or something equally worried. Yeah, so that's kind of the situation there from the security perspective. I wonder if we should jump into the phase 2, because I imagine that's the really big point of discussion that we should hop into.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to plow ahead with that.
Okay.
Thanks for that again, Paul. I think it's really important that, you know, people are aware. Yeah. of what we're up to behind the scenes. So I guess, yeah, phase 2 is coming up. 10 days left of phase 1. Phase 2 will begin. After that, where, as per our initial announcement in docs, during phase 2 of the bank distribution, we will be removing all restrictions. So no more whitelist. There will no longer be a 10K cap per pool. And once again, only 10 days left of phase 1. So phase 2 is beginning on Sunday, the 21st of March at 10 p.m. UTC. We're also going to be changing the rewards pool, or rewards per pool, for phase 2. We're looking at 10,500 bank. Will continue to be given out as rewards per week, but 33% of this, so 3,500, will now go to incentivize the bank ETH liquidity pool on Sushi Swap. The remaining 66%, which is 7,000 bank, will be split across 8 other pools. 3 of these will be the existing DAI, USDC, and USDT pools, which you currently have access to now, if you're whitelisted. For the remaining 5 pools of the total 8, is we want to engage with other leading DeFi communities. As such, some of you may be aware, there's a forum post up or a proposal up, which there's a riveting discussion, I might say. And we're going to open a
It sounds like he's being sarcastic, but he's not.
No, but I'm being serious. It is amazing to see. We're going to open a vote on Snapshot for you to choose which communities you feel essentially would be the best fit. The 5 that receive the highest number of votes will be added as pools during phase 2. So far, we suggested the current options in our forum proposal, which is ETH, Wi-Fi, Compound, Balancer, UniSushi, Link, Aave, and SNX. And assuming there's no disagreement with this proposal, we're going to proceed to organizing a snapshot vote. So I think it's very important that discussion, continues on this forum and is as lively as it has been, if not more.
Yeah. So jumping on that, over talking of discussion, let's jump back to some of the questions which we got. So RR, however your preferred pseudonym goes, has been asking about the similarities and differences between other stablecoin protocols. Great question. The sort of start of it, I will cover RAI quickly because we talked about the sort of blog post we got, but that's kind of the main one we get compared to all the time. So RAI is a fork of MakerDAO, which means that it has a unique property of having these negative interest rates compared to MakerDAO. But necessarily it kind of has a over-collateralized system because you take loans out in order to sort of create that stablecoin, whereas Float doesn't have that necessary over-collateralization built in. And the reason we can kind of do those properties is because of the way the auction mechanic works and the way we float. Because if you're floating, you don't have to worry so much about having a full 100% floating ratio, because you can start shifting the price down to sort of dampen the effect of that collateral, which is how we get the sort of stability from nothing from ETH. It's also super complicated with many control parameters. That's not a bad thing. It just means that it's an awful lot of work to implement and keep maintained. But it can also mean that it's very stable. So it's kind of what your focus is there and what sort of trade-offs you're willing to make. And so the trade-offs we're making for Float is that we're very interested in sort of controlling the purchasing power and keeping that enough to be buoyant, whereas they want to be super stable, and that negative interest rate is a method to do that. So Fei is another interesting example. Fei is a dollar peg stablecoin with a basket, and it's partly collateralized. So it doesn't expect to be 100%, just like we talked about before, but it also doesn't try to guide the price to 100%, which I find quite interesting, because it's a choice that we made, is to always try and return the sort of the basket factor, as we call it, to 100%, because I feel like that's sort of the point which is quite useful for stability, and people can trust that. There's quite a few sort of mechanical decisions they've made there. Like their launch is quite interesting, and the sort of general way that they stabilize with ETH is that sort of one-to-one redeemable and having that kind of big pool which they control. And if they need to sort of fix the price or change the price, then they sort of rug the pool, buy back up, and then dump it back into the pool. Is kind of the mechanic, which is very different to the way we do it, where we do these options which people voluntarily join in to sort of have that arbitrage opportunity and gain that profit. What else do we have? We had Frax. So Frax is also super interesting. They're sort of backed by USDC, and then sort of the mint redeem at any one point. And if the Frax is greater than 1, then you sort of reduce that bulk factor and start decreasing that collateralization ratio, which is a really neat trick. The difference is the big one is just that it's pegged, and they do have some really interesting stuff there. So something on our roadmap is bonds as another way to stabilize the protocol. So you have multiple sort of avenues of attack, and Frax has done some really good stuff related to that. So they definitely deserve recognition for. Do you want to grab a question out of the pile before I give that monopolized on that one, John?
Yeah, sure. So what we're getting personal now, which is what were you doing before starting Flow Protocol? I guess
Drinking tea and
yeah, I mean, as you found out, I was caught mid-sip. Yeah, I was drinking tea, actually, to be fairly honest with you. The team is, yeah, exactly. We're a diverse team as well. So some people like English breakfast, and other people like prefer green. So for the ones who are in phase 1. So this, I think, is a technical question on the pool contracts, where we kind of have an option.
I want to jump in for a second just to say what Terabellis has said about looking into your eyes as looking like into 2 bottomless pits, which I think is very sort of hypnocode-esque, those sort of awesome minds you've got in this one. But no, continue. Sorry, I just couldn't help myself.
It's all right. It's all right. Oh, so I see. Actually, to follow on to what you were talking about, there's Olympus Star. So I guess, yeah, with OHM, Olympus. I mean, yeah, look, it's a treasury backed, right? Stable coin, 1 DAI, 1 OHM, and once again, as I mentioned in the introduction, is we're not really here to do that. We're not here for dollar backing coins, particularly when there's, you know, fervorous money printing occurring, and we're here to build a crypto native unit of account. I'm not here to, you know, also rubbish on other people's projects, but I'm just saying this is what separates, I think, Float from the pack.
And I think at the current stage, like, it's got a really great goal of trying to be floating, but the current implementation they've got in V1 hasn't quite achieved that yet, which is by design. Like, it's aimed to ramp up. We're sort of hoping that we can start with the sort of design which is floating, rather than having to sort of bootstrap phase through it. So that's kind of the distinction there between us and Olympus DAO.
Yeah.
There's been a question by Lucia. For the ones who are in phase 1, do I need to thoughts? The answer for that is quite simple. You will have to withdraw a deposit, because the original vaults, we could in theory sort of remove the whitelist, but then the cap would still be there. So yes, there is that sort of stage. We'll try and make it super easy. Like, we'll make a UI button which just spam and then it will transfer everything over. So, you know, it's a decision there, but it shouldn't be too hard, much hardship. The one from Joseph, which I'm kind of working my way down. Yes, and I'm not going to talk about them in the sense that the partnerships and preliminary talks, just because they're still very early stages. But we do have some chats we're having, which are really exciting, and I'm looking forward to them. But yeah, I'm not going to spoil the surprise there because it's a bit early.
I see Ruth. So how do you secure against hacks? Security is very important to us, Ruth. I think this is a brilliant question, even though it's, some people may say, oh yeah, obviously, but, and so the code will be audited. We'll also get experts in the field to look at the protocol code, particularly the auction code.
Yeah, and I think the one thing we want to mention there is the sort of top tier of auditors are very booked up, and we want to make sure we still get a really high quality audit alongside the official one, which I'm sure will be done by a great company. But we want to sort of also get a lot of really technical people who are really deeply involved, do this as a day job to look through it and kind of pick it apart, which is what we had for the first stage with the staking contract, alongside using a pre-existing base with the SNX on, which is really sort of bulletproof as you can make these staking contracts. So yeah, it's a great question. Security is always important. There is no decision that isn't having security in mind, especially related to smart contracts. Crypto native DU as researchers see a potential for float to move beyond the crypto sphere. I do, but I'm always going to be optimistic about the project. So I think there's always potential, and I think it's important to sort of keep your eyes wide open and see what opportunities are going to be there. I think if this thing reaches traction we want to, then of course people are going to want to use it beyond the crypto sphere, and that's the sort of focus there.
Agreed. Apologies, Paul. I lost connection. I'm back now though, but so lost it mid answer to Ruth. So will you do an anonymous interview on Bankless anytime soon? I guess will we, Paul? Is that on the cards? I haven't received an invite personally.
Yeah, no, I haven't either. But anonymous interviews are something we're very willing to do. Like that's why we're having these community calls. That's why we spent the time setting up these fun little deep fakes. But it's doing these kind of AMA stuff. We were very selective at the beginning, and I think we'll still continue to be quite selective with that. But we're quite enthusiastic to talk to more people about it and get our sort of fake faces in front of others, because we think it's quite fun and quite interesting. And there's future partnerships. So kind of linking back to that thing I said already, we're in chats with people, but they're still very early stages. And the sort of strategy in the future for that is we're going to sort of aim for particular market sectors to sort of try and use float as the main sort of unit there. And I think that's the sort of route we want to go down. Obviously, we've got some funds in the liquidity and the sort of methods to incentivize that process. But we are we want to be the digital unit of account, which means everyone is going to be wanting to use float to pay for things. And we're going to sort of make sure, though, paying for digital goods is what we are all about. So if you've got a digital good, that's the sort of target audience, really, which is pretty expansive at the moment. Is this Ryan from, sorry, Joseph? There's quite a few Ryans, but, and again, I have no idea how to say that name. Any guesses, John, for the one about Ringo and George?
I mean, we did have a gig last night. We had a gig last night, so I think they're still recovering. What did you say you were working? Oh, wow, they're flying. They're flying in the chat now. What did you say you were working on? The white paper and how the protocol will work. When will it be available? So we the white paper. Yeah, exactly. It's where we want to produce something that allows the users, the reader, something that's appealing to the reader, where it's not just a typical, paper they might read on the archive or, on any other crypto currency documentation, but it's something they can actually interact with and say, oh, if the float market price is this, how will the auction correct it? And they can twiddle some knobs and see what happens to the bank price, for example, in a particular scenario. So we're planning to actually getting out soon. Being researchers, we're often perfectionists as well. So especially with published material, but the plan is, sometime around phase 2, whether it's at the start of phase 2 or at the end of phase 2, but it will be around that time.
In answer to Terabellus' question above about what extent is float integrated with long-term ambitions, it's fully long-term. Like, this is not a project we did solely for an academic objective or a funded research project. We want this to be more than just a book level research. We want it to be out there in the open. I've worked on papers in the past where, it was a great concept, but never really took off because it didn't get that kind of impression behind it and didn't get that drive. And then everyone just went, oh, this is a nice paper. And then it kind of ended there. And that's definitely not what we want with this one. So we're taking this one far beyond the book level research in answer to that. Philip is asking about moving float away from ETH to different protocols in terms of layer 1, layer 2, or in terms of the underlying basket. That should clarify that, and then we'll see what we get back from Philip. So what's the next one we got? The trippy views we've definitely got, yeah. They are quite fun. We didn't want to go the full hog of actually impersonating the Beatles with very realistic puppet faces, which we discovered was surprisingly realistic, but did fall quite a lot into the uncanny valley. So we are keeping them in the wavy area, which I think is more fun. Any incentives for float holders after initial minting ceremony? I will take that one. So in terms of the incentives we want to do, we want to do the float ETH pool, because that will become quite valuable for the actual auctions themselves, because we want flash traders or flash arbitragers to be very comfortable making those adjustments. And the easiest way to do that is with a nice big float ETH pool.
Yeah.
That's super useful because then we can just have really small price corrections be done really efficiently. And then we're also talking about managing interest rates on lending protocols. Is another idea we had for a version of 1.2, which is basically allowing on RA to sort of borrow or supply a lot of float, and then that interest rate becomes another method we can use to try and keep that price where we want it. So that's kind of the vision for sort of further steps in the head, is just giving as many prompts as we can to try and control that topic price, so that if one doesn't work as well as we thought it would, then the others can get back on board. We think the auction is the best one for that, which is why we're going with it for step 1. But the other ways should give some impact, if not the full amount. The next one, layer 2s. Do you want to take that, John? I realize I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, so, I mean, the plan with layer 2 is that for now, okay, we're building this protocol, we're focusing on layer 1 for now. Yeah, I mean, with optimism, it should be compatible with layer 2. And yeah, it will save gas issues on transactions. Going back to also the other protocols as well, as we're not completely against it being available on other platforms. But I think at this stage of development, as Paul has already mentioned, there's, this is further down the line, V1, V2, V3, or V1.2, V1.3, depending on how you want to use your number system.
Yeah, and I think when we're very much not averse to layer 2s. I kind of did a little post in the dev chat, went a bit technical in the sense that kind of the whitelist solution is a layer 2 solution. It's just a sort of as basic as you can go with layer 2. So I think it's, it's something we're very aware of, and gas prices are something that have to be worked around at the moment. But I think I'm hopeful at least that they may become less problematic, or at least these layer 2 solutions will develop to the point where it will not be an issue. What is C saying? An impressively short name. A lot of times with the initial mining phase ends, the interest in the project tends to die down. Even the Wi-Fi couldn't accept the situation where sushi is having inflation token was getting more successful. Where does bank fit between those two extreme inflationary models? Okay, so in answer to that question, we want to keep this a little bit up to governments, because we don't want to make too many executive decisions about the inflationary model quite a lot. But the interesting place for that is where the bank hits is based upon the collateral change. So bank will become increase in price quite quickly if the collateral goes up quite quickly. And so because of that, you can see that interesting sort of raise, or like that will make it a much more valuable token. I think that the interest in the project stuff, that the trick for that is doing lots more integrations and getting lots more people involved. We've got lots of sort of ongoing plate spinning there, and we're planning to spin plenty more. It's not something we want to happen. Obviously, we want to keep the interest up, and we're not too worried about doing so actually, because there's real demand for the actual product, which I think if that wasn't the case, then yes, we'd be a lot more concerned. Whereas because we think this is the right answer, I'm starting to exhaust our questions, guys.
Yeah,
if you've got any more, feel free to.
running out of gas.
First Encode Club of non-interest, how did that come about? Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it kind of turned out in quite an amusing way, because we were starting off sort of thinking about what we wanted to do in the sort of stablecoin side, and then we were talking more about some particular sort of public figures in this kind of ETH community, which are really sort of bombastic characters, and these characters sell the product, but the product themselves, when you research it or look quite deeply into it, doesn't quite have the same impact, or isn't quite as impressive. And that's when we sort of had this sort of like, what if we just completely got rid of these characters, or we had these characters be completely effaced that could be taken up by someone else, and it's just the character of Paul or the character of John who run the protocol, irrespective of which person is puppeting behind the scenes. And that we sort of approached Encode about it, and we're like, would you guys even be up for this? What do you think? And they were really supportive and thought this was going to be quite a lot of fun. So that's how it came about.
Yeah. Should I take Philip's question, and then maybe you can take Joseph's on these black swans link in the old confidence contraction case, I guess, is the classic. But so with Philip, how do you recommend we build a community, especially developers, to create dApps that will broaden the adoption of Flow? So this is a very valid point. No developers, things essentially tend to slowly die up. We're thinking of multiple options to get developers interested. One's this kind of proof of a developer airdrop we're contemplating, where essentially we kind of incentivize developers to take part in Flow if they've never heard of it before, by sending some tokens to their address, which is part of a zero knowledge proof. It's a bit cheeky, and there are other ideas we have in mind, but that's certainly one thing that's on the cards.
Yeah, no, and the other sort of methods for that are the integration we talked about. I mean, we have this great relationship with Encode, and perhaps we can sponsor something through them, which will get people really interested, or have our own sort of hackathons for that, just because we've seen how successful those can be in churning out really good products. And answering Joseph's question about global public utilities for the internet era, and about protection measures for black swan events. So black swan events, in case you don't know, are the unknown unknowns. It's Nassim Taleb, wasn't originally his, but he popularized it. But it is a great sort of concept of how do you deal with these sort of dramatic events that you can't predict happening, or that you only start predicting when you look back. And for float in particular, it's quite interesting because one of the protocol's favorite cases is case 3, the social confidence contraction, which is when the market price for float dumps, but the Ethereum or the collateral price actually doesn't change that much. The protocol loves this case. So this is like its favorite thing because it means that it can resupply the basket at a really generous rate, because anyone who's deciding to sort of not believe that float will go back up is actually paying a premium to the protocol to do that, which means our collateral rate starts to go through the roof because the ratio, as we're taking float off the market, we're taking it off the market for below market price, and hence the ratio starts to increase. And that's kind of an example of where something which we can't understand why would happen would actually happen. And this kind of idea of other sort of instances, I mean, obviously the whole point of black swans is the unknown unknowns, but trying to build in contingency for these things which we don't expect is what we're trying to do. The other sort of key mechanism there is we start our auctions from a sort of idiots like trade. So these are cases where no one would take it because they are completely unprofitable. But if, say, an Oracle did something crazy or an ETH price did something crazy, then suddenly this trade might look profitable. And because we're expecting this to be automated, or because we're expecting some competition there, suddenly these idiotic trades become a supporting case for when these kind of crazy scenarios happen, because they allow the sort of escape valve to go in this sort of earlier case. And that's kind of what we built in from the beginning to try and sort of adapt to either Oracle misprices or for things similar to that. Let's see what other questions we've got. GG, what's this question about? Oh yes, so we've got another comparison one. We did quickly talk about it, but to give you a quick sort of summary about why you want to use float compared to the 3. So RAI is generally seen as like an over-collateralized model because of the way it's done from the fork maker down. It can be seen as quite complicated, justly so, to get greater stability, but it also means that it's quite inscrutable, and there's a lot more surface area for bugs, even if there's not necessarily the rate of bugs is lower. In terms of sort of Fei is interesting, but I find the sort of mechanics of how they deal with below dollar pegs not something I would do. So the way they sort of rug pull, buyback, and then back into the liquidity pools is not a mechanic I would have chosen. But you know, we will see how it performs when they sort of come out with it. Much like you will see how we perform, and we obviously believe we might come up on top, but that's sort of a biased view, as I'm sure you can understand. And then for Olympus DAO, the current model, so their stage 1, is quite close to a $1 peg stablecoin. I know that's not their eventual goal, but it's something which we are, at the moment, we don't see that as the approach we would have taken, because we want to go straight into the floating model. Cool.
What else?
Pick another one, John, and then I'll have a read through.
You know, there aren't many, I guess. What's your plan to make sure Float/Bank has a healthy treasury for the long term? Is that referring to the actual treasury or the basket? Assuming it's the basket, that will change value over time based on expansions and contractions. Every expansion, the basket will be filled. Similarly, if you're actually talking about the real treasury, that's also going to be filled on expansions. In the docs, we explain that the protocol takes a small fee And this
You
is
can
something
think of
we're,
this as the
sorry, yes,
yeah,
Paul, go ahead.
you can think about this as like the arbitrage profit. So
Yeah.
any arbitrage profit that's made, because we're giving the opportunity for that to happen, we can take a fee from that arbitrage profit, which goes into the treasury. So that's how we can keep that sort of maintained long term.
Precisely. And that will most likely be on, well, that will be on the bank token from the arbitrages.
Philip's question about gaming the market cap system. It's not something that I would particularly want to do, just because it's a little bit like a get rich quick kind of scheme. That's not really the aim of the protocol. The protocol is to provide a useful service rather than just trying to get a temporary bump in the prices. So I'm hopeful that the sort of low, slow way, hopefully not that slow, we're keeping it at a rapid pace at the moment, but the sort of trying not to do any sort of systems where we just kind of do it quick and dirty is kind of what we're trying to avoid. But you know, I like the enthusiasm, because I think it would be great to get lots more eyeballs interested. But that would be sort of my sort of view on that, because I think it's for Black Friday on steroids and how MakerDAO failed. Yeah, there is some truth to that, in the sense there are still sort of death spiral sort of descriptions which I've read about. The research papers related to that. I can recommend a few which are good if someone is interested. But yeah, there is equally issues related to that, which are natural, and I think they're very aware of these, and they acknowledge them as risks. But it's something which they do their best to mitigate. How do you plan to get people more interested in a volatility currency versus stablecoin? Feels like you need to reprogram how people think about money. I think that's quite interesting, because I don't think people are programmed to deal with money as a completely stable stablecoin. Because if you think about the dollar price, that fiat price moves quite a lot in terms of what goods you can buy for it. Sometimes that movement is slow, but having it moving at all is quite normal. Like if you, there's an example of how much they call it the hamburger index, which is like one of my favorite.
The Economist.
Yeah, which is basically saying that how much a hamburger costs around the world as a measure for goods and services. So that I think is quite interesting, because you can see how these prices change and how these prices really aren't as stable as they might appear to be. And linked to that, we want to start with goods and services that are digital in nature, and where the value is not clearly connected to dollars. So if you think of NFTs, you kind of don't want those to be priced in dollars, because then people think, oh my God, I'm paying $7 grand for a particular image, or you know. Whereas if it's priced in float, because it captures that sort of crypto market, it suddenly seems more normalized, and it's about going like, okay, well, yes, it's worth this much float, but I know that float is related to this particular crypto market. So it may go up, it may go down, and hence it doesn't feel quite as foreign, because you're buying digital goods with digital currency, or a crypto native currency. Cool. What else have we got? Joseph's asking about checks on governance capture. Yeah, that is something which we're considering. The obvious ones are trying to make sure the incentive appeals to as wide an audience as possible. We sort of started doing that with the sort of democratic launch. That was one of the core focuses behind it, as well as giving it to a lot of holders. Obviously, there is a reason for other people to be interested in it, and I think one thing I sort of think is quite important is we need to let people go if they're not interested. So, you know, if people have joined the bank pool and they are like, they're doing it because it's got a high APY or something similar, we want to let those kind of people go if they don't believe in the project, because it's going to happen at some point, and then we're happy to pull that band-aid early. And in a way, it is a win for that little guy, because we're not here to judge them about not sharing our vision. Even if we think, you know, they're foolish for making that decision, and we think that bank will go up. If they want that temporary win, which is they might regret in the future, then that's fair enough. But I think that that sort of aspect is quite important to sort of us to remember and be like, oh yeah, so we don't want any governance capture, but just because people are buying up these tokens is kind of a big endorsement for the protocol or for the bank as well, because it's saying, look, there's this real interest and real demand. And these people are spending serious money to grab this bank, unlike the stakers where everyone gets their money back. So I think it's, yeah, that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's very important that, you know, there's an opportunity for people to exit if they want, but, you know, we're here for the long run. We're here to build something serious, and there's no judgment on them. So when float, I think, Eden.
When float, yeah. Go for it, John.
Yeah, I'll go for this. So as I mentioned earlier, there's phase 1, phase 2. After phase 2, and all the initial audits are done, because once again, security is paramount. I think that was Ruth's question earlier. And, you know, we want to make sure, yeah, the code is audited. There most likely will be delays due to audits. This can happen. But so far, we're looking very good on our planned timeline. Things are going to plan very nicely. And currently the goal is essentially to have the initial minting ceremony of float to happen, you know, 1 to 2 weeks at the end of the final bank distribution phase. So, you know, there it is, I think.
Philip's been asking about the rights to license to distribute thousands of films, and the fact that integrated crypto payments may be a guide such a tool which is inflicting to help an existing business add such features to their website. That sounds like a great opportunity and something we would be on board with. Feel free to ping us more about that. Obviously, the protocol as it currently stands, we're focused on getting that out there and through audit and everything else. But yeah, it's more integrations, I think, is no bad thing, and we will try and make them as easy as possible to happen throughout that process. Cool.
Yeah, I think
questions died up again a little bit, but
yeah, and time-wise also, we're coming up to the hour, I think.
Oh, we really are.
That flew by very quickly, didn't it?
It did.
Blimey.
I'll give it. I think we'll probably start wrapping up then, if that's the primary question sorted. As always, feel free to ping us as and when it comes about, either on Discord or forum posts or anywhere else. We try and keep a good sort of finger on the pulse of the community in that respect. We think it's quite important compared to other projects which might sort of mandate from above. We want to sort of be very bottom up in that respect. Sort of another quick sort of announcement I'll make at the end is we're going to do the comparison posts or the comparison articles out tomorrow. So if you want to go into a bit more depth, let me mention very quickly here. We'll talk all about that, and that'll be very interested in seeing that. One last question, and then we really must let everyone toddle off. But Tobas is asking about going deeper into how the first auction will incentivize ETH deposits. So the current plan, I assume this is talking about the minting ceremony as opposed to the first auction. Perhaps I'm wrong. Do I get a response? Yes.
Yes.
Minting ceremony. So the minting ceremony is planned to be incentivized somewhat, just because we want to make sure that given the people who are first or most interested in float get a level of incentive behind that. And the rate of incentive, we're currently thinking what we originally wrote down, it was 5%, and it's going to be a capped sale because we don't want to sort of money grab for these people. This is purely to supply the original basket factor, which is necessary for the running. And we kind of want to have the protocol respond to the demand quite nicely. So if anything, we want to underestimate that demand so that we can have a nice sort of increasing period where everyone starts to see how these auctions work.
Yeah.
Cool. And I also think for the first auctions, kind of related to that, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for sort of arbitragers or people willing to take that arbitrage opportunity, because I think there'll be, before it gets all automated away and the margins come very thin, I think that will be quite an opportunity there too. Cool. Anything else from you, John? Otherwise, I'll.
No,
good.
I'm very happy. I think I firstly also want to, or lastly want to say, you know, massive thank you to everyone who's attended this call. And if you didn't, you know, still thanks for being part of this amazing journey and being, you know, on the Telegram, pinging us messages and on the Discord. And, you know, because realistically, I think the community is popping at this stage for a project this young, which is great to see. And honestly, it's lovely.
Perfect. On that lovely sentiment, I think I will leave it at that. But yes, thanks everyone for coming to our first community call. I hopefully we'll do more of these in the future. Keep floating.
Keep floating. Farewell.